Hi, David. How are you?
Hi, hi there. Yeah, good, thanks. Good. Yourself?
Very well, very well. Yes, we're on to episode 5 now. So episode 5 of the Leaders Series. So just again, for everyone's benefit, to reacquaintance you with what we're doing. GCS is a technology recruitment brand. Our GCS Connect brand basically focuses on connecting using webinars, meetups, and roundtables, connecting expert, talented, innovative companies. We used to be quite a lot offline. Now we do most of it, well, all of it online. And out of this, we've started to do the Leaders Series, and we have David McGovern with us today from Whitepit Consulting. And the Leaders Series is basically a series of conversations where we're speaking to senior people within our network and understanding their response to the current business environment and how they're using their experiences from previous to hopefully help, facilitate what they're going to do in the future. So David has 20 years experience, sorry, about 20 years there, the same as myself in recruitment in the European telecoms sector. He's worked within video on demand, within broadcast, and with a host of exciting companies and well-known companies, brands such as Virgin Media, Tiscali, and Three. He's currently consulting for Liberty Global, so it's great to have him on board and part of the Leaders Series. So welcome, David.
Thanks. Yeah, pleasure to be here, David. Yeah.
So obviously I can introduce you only so well. So if you want to just take a quick few minutes just to give us a bit about your background and what you do and where you particularly focus on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So my original background before telecoms was in retail.
John Lewis and stuff.
John Lewis Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
Focused still on the technology side. So I focused on things like introducing innovative customer-facing technologies, especially EPOS systems, in-store screens for customers, loyalty systems, and loyalty schemes in the day where they were still a new thing. Retail is a bit of a strange industry to work in. So that when the opportunity came to take that into something new, which was telco, which was, as you say, 20 years ago. I joined what at the time was a small startup company called Video Networks, which was the first company in the UK to launch a commercial video on demand platform, utilizing the BT's telco network to deliver high quality TV and internet. So and I actually joined to launch their retail offering, so hence the retail background. But from then on, over the last 20 years, I've worked in. You mentioned some of them, a variety of different companies, right from that startup Video Networks through to some of the big beasts like Virgin Media, Tiscali when it was still a large European player, and mostly in permanent roles, but then for the last 5-6 years I've been doing my own consulting through my company Whitepit Consulting, as you mentioned earlier. But the sort of the theme through my career, other than a sort of a brief dalliance for a couple of years with customer experience, has really been anything that involves major change, transformation in the telco industry. So whether that's major product launches, whether it's restructurings. I've I guess had the dubious pleasure of being through quite a lot of pre and post merger and acquisition integration programs. So I tend to find myself getting involved in things that lots of other people don't want to get involved in, because they're either because they're dirty and nasty, or because they're failing, or because they're driving major change across the business. So I guess that's really been the theme for me, has been change and transformation over the past 20 years.
And obviously everyone loves change, don't they? So that makes your job really easy.
Everyone says they love change, yes. Generally until it impacts them.
I mean, we obviously as a business go through a lot of change. We went for an MBO about 3 years ago, and that involved becoming part of a kind of wider corporate group, as you said, like mergers and acquisitions. And you do quite a lot in due diligence, don't you? But there's lots of stuff that you don't really think about that comes out in the laundry, as I guess, at the end.
Absolutely, and due diligence is, let's face it, is a bit of a game, because the acquiring party or the leader in a merger is trying to find out the things that are going to tick the box on making sure the deal works for them. Yep. And there'll be a level of kind of operational stuff in there, but maybe not quite as much. And obviously, if you're in the party that's being acquired, then you're answering the questions. You're obviously being truthful and giving the answers, but you're not necessarily volunteering some of the things that might cause you, challenges day to day in your business. And so there's an awful lot that comes out in the wash in the weeks and months after those sort of deals have been signed. And even with the best teams and the most thorough diligence, there's months and years of work that then comes in afterwards to making sure that you get the best out of that deal, that you do the right thing by people and you do the right thing by customers. And
that's definitely what we've found, and we were talking about maybe a kind of 150 person company. So the ones that you've dealt with and they're dealing with at the moment, I know a lot kind of bigger than that and a lot more kind of process. But it is generally, I've found around process, isn't it? You might have two good processes, but you can only have one process. So you have to kind of pick the best or pick the compromise.
Absolutely. And even if you've got the best process, the process generally still rely on the two key things are people and communication. And anywhere where those break down, whether even in existing companies, you can have the best process. You could have taken it through Six Sigma. You can have it operate as efficient as you want. But most big processes in companies rely on different teams, different people, different systems talking to each other. And in my experience, where it breaks down is when you get those touch points, when something passes from one department to another, from one person to another. And then, of course, you try putting two companies together and bringing those processes and those people together. And you absolutely can't underestimate the time you need to take to analyze and understand how those things work before you can have hope of trying to sort of pick the best of both and get the right answer at the end of it.
And what's interesting for us now is obviously part of the reason for doing the Leader Series is we're in a period of huge change, which has been dropped on us by God or someone like that, who knows, which obviously we're going to talk about quite a lot, but obviously you're quite involved and obviously you can't, we'll obviously go through how much you can talk about it, but with regards to Liberty and Virgin Media and this O2 merger and stuff. So you're in a period of real change at the moment, but I guess with your experience that you've had so far in your career, you're used to that. Because it's something that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. That's your BAU, isn't it? Most people's this would be changing in BAU. So when you think about those kind of past significant challenges that you've dealt with those major kind of corporates, what are the key ones that you've had to overcome in the past, that you can kind of talk about and help us to understand?
Yeah, I guess for me, the key thing that is a constant through any type of change, whether it's a restructuring to reduce costs, whether it's an expansion of a business, whether it's a merger or acquisition, or in this case, whether it's something that, let's face it, 6 months ago, very, very few people foresaw, and there would be very few, if any, companies on earth that, if they're talking truthfully, would have had this type of thing in their business continuity planning.
No one plans for a pandemic. That's one of the favourite phrases at the moment.
Exactly.
Get nearer the router. That's another favourite in my house.
Exactly. And so, but I think the one constant for me throughout all of those types of change is that any type of significant change, the biggest impact is on the people in those businesses. And if you don't start middle and end with the impact on people, then you
right.
haven't got a hope of that change being successful.
Sure.
So it's interesting. I know we're going to talk a bit about the sort of the technology that and how businesses are using and may use technology to both to help in the current situation and to come out the other side of it. My view is slightly different on that, which is that the technology for me in my sort of career has been the technology as a tool, and you can pick the best tools that you've got, but unless you have people coming with you along that journey,
sure.
then it frankly doesn't matter how efficient, how effective, how groundbreaking that technology is. The difference this time is that with a sort of a normal transformation program, if you like, or a merger acquisition, you've got time to prepare for it. You've got time to start having those kind of conversations with people to kind of read the room, to start building that consensus and that understanding of whether people agree with it or not, why you're doing this change, how it's going to benefit the business, and then start to bring people along that journey, accepting that everyone follows a different route. Everyone has their own particular path, depending on whether they're part of driving that change, whether they're being impacted by it. The difference this time is that it's happened very suddenly, and a lot of things that I would normally do, I can't do, because the biggest thing in any sort of change like that is actually getting people together, actually getting them physically in a room, because you can read how people, you can see how people are feeling. Here we've had probably the biggest the biggest impact on a lot of people that maybe they've had in their working lives, have certainly had for a significant period of time. And that's coincided with not being able to actually be with people to talk it through. Everyone will be remote, and so you can have the best networking tools, the best video conferencing tools. I mean, the fact that we're able to sit here speaking to each other, that's great. But it for me, it's no substitute for that human to human interaction.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the biggest challenge for me certainly at the moment is, how do you take what you know from running those sort of change programs and then apply it in an environment where you can't do a lot of the things that you normally do. You can't be in a room with people.
So when you've come into change before, I mean, I would generally suggest the changes, if you're talking about mergers or M&A, the change has been driven from an executive or C-level level. It's generally not a revolution from below, it's it's a C-level. So do you find you usually come into change with people with reticence or excitement?
It's always a mixed bag. Yes, there will always be certainly the mergers, acquisitions, restructurings, operational efficiencies, new product launches. There's always going to be someone in the C-suite or at CEO level that is sponsoring that change, is right behind, and is probably already quite a long way down that journey, because they've maybe been thinking about this for a while. And you get the full range with everybody else of people that are excited by that and maybe part of the group that's been working on it, through to people that feel threatened by it, or those that just sit back and see what happens. So every change will have those people at sort of all stages of that change cycle, and that will continue right the way through the change. There'll be some people that never really come on board with it. There'll be others that maybe once they understand the rationale, whether they like it or not, once people have been able to analyse it, get on board with it, they then become either proponents or they become accepting of it. But even with it's very interesting, even with a change where a sort of a traditional change where you've got somebody at the C-suite who is sponsoring it, it's quite rare for that consensus to be right the way across the C-suite group. And so actually one of the first things you need to do is to see, well, exactly where are the leaders, the people that are going to need to sponsor this and lead it within their own teams, where are they on that curve, and building the consensus there before you actually get onto the wider group of people.
Wow. So I see that in our business as well, that you make this decision, but then you have to get everyone on board at this level, and then you get everyone on board at this level in order to drive that change.
And quite often the person sponsoring will say, well, yes, we're all behind it. And of course, once you then dig a little deeper, spend some time one-on-one, you find that almost always isn't the case, even at that senior level. And so the amount of time you have to spend up front building that consensus, sometimes months of doing that before you're actually ready to take it out to a wider group. Sure. None of which has happened with what we're dealing with now.
No, not yet. You're at the formative stages, I guess, aren't you? So, and you mentioned this already, and as a technology recruiter, we like to talk about, technology and how that's helped. Before we go into that, I mean, obviously as an experienced change and transformation expert, do you use any particular, methodologies or structures in order to drive those forward? You mentioned Six Sigma. Do you use something that you go back to every single time?
I tend not to,
Okay.
and reason. So there are lots of things you can use, and the one I probably go back to most is a guy called Cotter, who's done a lot, who did a lot of work on the kind of the cycle of change and transformation. But I'm much less of a proponent of kind of rolling out a methodology and using it, because every change is different, and if you try and make that particular project or program fit a particular methodology, what you'll then tend to find is that something will hit you that it doesn't fit. Plus, you kind of then get more. There's a risk, from my perspective, you get more caught up in the whole kind of process of running change, as opposed to outcomes that you need at the end of it. And my earlier point about that, whether you're working in technology, telecoms, whatever industry you're working in, the success or failure of change always comes down to the people involved in it. And so I think having you can have all of the different methodologies, read all the textbooks, have them kind of in your locker, but it's got to come down to the company, the culture of that company, and the people involved in both driving and being on the receiving end of that change. And that's where I think there is never I know it's a cliche, but there's never a kind of a one size fits all. And that's always been my concern, is that if you kind of use a methodology as your start point, you'll miss something, or you'll get too involved in the process for the process's sake.
Well, I guess recruitment is a good example, right? You could train someone to do recruitment. This is how you do it. But every single human being and every single process is different. So therefore, you can never actually train anyone to do this particular piece of recruitment, because you have to change it according to the person that you're dealing with. And that's what a good change management specialist can do. And that's what a good recruiter can do, I guess.
Absolutely. And, although I certainly don't advocate that, that you're sort of running free-form change programs, things like that. But so much of what I see in change programs, what I'm doing when I think about it, is calling back on the experience I've had of either similar situations, similar types of people working with, or similar company cultures, and then you bring in your own experience to it. So clearly, if you're starting out as a change or transformation professional, you need some, in the same way as if you're starting out as a project manager, you might start with something like Prince 2, because it gives a good grounding in the basics. But the more experience you get in working in change and transformation, the more you rely on that experience to deal with a given situation.
And particularly as a leader, the person is looking to the leader to make kind of calls that are maybe based on a vision and a strategy, as opposed to, well, we just tick these boxes. You've probably got a PMO or someone that's linking into the box ticking.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's always if it's a well thought through and well funded and structured program of change, you're always going to have enough people that can do, as you say, the box ticking and write the reports and document everything. But as a leader of that change, then it is all about bringing people along with you that are ready to be brought along, understanding who isn't, and dealing, as I say, with those natural emotions and those natural ways of dealing with change that are not even you can't even categorize it as groups of people deal in different ways. Every individual deals with that change in a different way. And also, regardless of, because I do a lot of work, I've done a lot of work with people that, project managers, program managers, analysts, people that deal with change every day of their lives. And yet, if that change impacts them, they're no different to anybody else. They have the same fears, concerns.
Move from that structure to that structure, you change things.
Absolutely. And there are certain things as a leader, I think, that you do repeat every time. So there are certain, you have to be, you have to have the knowledge and the ownership of that change. And if you don't believe in it yourself, then you shouldn't be involved in it as a leader. easier said than done sometimes, especially if it's things like mergers and acquisitions. But you can't, you can never kind of apologise for that change or hide behind it or say, "Oh, somebody else has done that." If you're a leader, if you're the face of that change, then you've got to own it. You've got to represent it. You don't apologise for it, because it's this is change that is being done for the future good of the business almost always. And it may be very difficult, but the last thing anyone needs if they're being going through a restructuring or they're worried their job might be at risk is not feeling they've got an outlet, because the leader is saying, well, such and such has done this. It's not actually my change, but I've got to push it through. And that's the way these things fail.
So talking about change, obviously I always like to how is WFH for you? What's a positive and a negative? What's your setup? How are you finding it?
I'm fortunate from a practical perspective that I've got a home office that I can close the door to and walk up the stairs. So once I'm in my office, I've got plenty of light. It's a nice environment to work in, and so I don't miss the daily commute at all. I don't miss getting on a tube early in the morning or getting the red-eye flight to Amsterdam.
Me neither.
But what I am missing much more than I thought I would is the office environment. It's one of those things you don't realise how much, and it's a recurring theme in what I've said, but that human to human interaction. Whether it's from a professional perspective, because you're trying to run a change program and kicking it off, you ideally want people in a room together so you can see the body language, read it. But just the day-to-day being in an office environment with people and having those little chats, those water cooler moments. As much as I love my wife and my family, and it's great to be seeing them, I'm missing the office environment much more than I thought I would.
And when you're talking about people and understanding the team and reading the room, as it were, it's those water cooler chats and those sort of conversations is where you really get it, isn't it? You might overhear something or something.
It is. It absolutely is. Or you're in a meeting
conversation or something.
Yeah, a pub conversation, going out grabbing a sandwich with someone, or even the more specific things like being in a meeting with a group of people and you see somebody just isn't engaged with the meeting, and then afterwards you can just go and have a quiet chat, do a bit of digging, find out what it was that was concerning them. It's much more, especially if you've got a large sort of 20 people on a conference call or a WebEx or a Zoom or whatever. It's much more difficult to kind of read the room and actually pick up on some of those things that might be niggling at somebody. So both socially and professionally, that human-to-human interaction, being in the same place at the same time is critical, and I miss it a lot.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think we all do. So coming into now, you're obviously consulting with Liberty at the moment, and there's obviously a lot of news around the merger. Was that why you originally came into the organisation, or were you doing change and transformation in a different area?
Yes, yeah, and I'm not directly involved in the Virgin Media O2 merger, so I formally found out about that at the same time as a lot of people did. It was announced internally that it was happening. Although I think it makes a huge amount of sense for both businesses. Yeah. And interesting, when I was at 3, I worked on the aborted acquisition of O2 when I was there. So it's
that's right. Just down the road, weren't they? Really, that would have been easier.
A little bit about the organisation there, but no, I actually came into Liberty just over 3 years ago now to do a combination of some restructuring projects within the projects and program space, and also working on a major new product launch, which has now happened, which was the first joint venture between Sky and Virgin Media advertising. So for launching targeted and personalised TV advertising.
Okay, yeah, the future.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of work within broadcast. Myself and one of my colleagues, John Gibbs, and some of the conversations we're having obviously link into that. And it's very interesting to see the level of change that's happened in this industry compared to maybe other industries is constantly disrupting itself, isn't it? And so you would expect these types of industries to be quite good in this situation.
You would, yeah. Each industry is each company is sort of better and worse at certain aspects of it. I mean, certainly for Liberty as a business, Liberty is always active in the mergers and acquisition space. It always has. And so things like, obviously Virgin Media O2 is a particularly large deal, but if just only have to look back across the past couple of years and say that there was Liberty sold its German and Eastern European cable operations to Vodafone. There was sale prior to that to T-Mobile, now Magenta in Austria.
Sure.
The direct-to-home business in Eastern European got sold to M7 Group. So it's
they're a market maker, really, aren't they? They make the market, they drive the market.
Yeah, and that for me makes it a really really fascinating place to work, because it's there is. At the moment, I would say that it's slightly different, because at the moment, one of the things that customers need is continuity of service. With whatever business you're in, whatever country you live in, whatever the lockdown restrictions are and things like that, the importance of stable broadband, of the mobile networks, and also equally of broadcast and entertainment services has never been higher. No. And so there's almost a duty of care.
I would definitely agree with you there, Dave. I would definitely agree. The continuity of broadband and Wi-Fi is probably the most important question in life at the moment.
Absolutely. And things that most over the past few weeks, things that wouldn't normally even really make the news, like everyone hopes and plans for outages not happening, but you get a small outage affecting maybe 50,000 people, and it's on the news, and it's being, and it's because
it affects people's productivity even more, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's not just that you can't watch Netflix for a couple of hours; it's that you can't work, your kids can't homeschool, and so it's really brought home just how much people rely, even if they didn't think about it before, just how much we rely on that technology.
So going forward, in this situation that you're in now, and the projects that you're kind of working on at the moment to drive and roll out, obviously you've said the difficulties that you have with regards to not being able to interact with the people so well. So how are you using technology? How are you dealing with those problems at this moment in time to overcome them? Because obviously you can't say, we can't do it now. So.
Exactly, we can't stand still and not do anything. So I mean, there's kind of two aspects to it. One is the human aspect, and the other is the technology aspect. I think from a technology perspective, the benefit of being working in a telecommunications company is that obviously we have lots of network and bandwidth and tools and network professionals. So the practicalities of being able to have meetings with anyone across Europe or suppliers in the States has not really been an issue for anyone within Liberty Global. I mean, thanks in no small part to some fairly superhuman efforts of some of the network and workplace engineering early on, but the kind of the practical aspects are, because we work in so many different entities in so many different countries. A lot of what we did anyway was over WebEx or over teleconferencing, even before the pandemic hit us. So that's not been really an issue, but the change for me has been absolutely, and what I mentioned earlier about that human to human interaction, and how do you replace if you're having kind of transactional calls, project updates like that, absolutely fine.
To get everyone on Zoom and it's all okay. And
exactly, we use WebEx for most of ours, and Microsoft Teams for some, but you can, as you well know, you can share screens, everyone can see what's happening, they can interject, ask questions. So for those kind of transactional meetings, it's absolutely fine. For the I would say the non-transactional, as I call them, so that when we've been kicking off some fairly major pieces of work, and we've had to hold all of the kick-off workshops remotely, and so you've got 20 people on a call that have, in some cases, never met before, are all trying to find out about the project, and the key thing for me there has been trying to work out how to read the room when you can't actually, in some cases, even see people, because we don't mandate that people use video for calls if they, I quite like it, but I see other people, but it's stated, and so when I'm sitting in those sort of calls, you're trying to I'm trying to multitask. I'm trying to, on the one hand, listen to the questions, listen to the interactions, take the feedback. But on the other hand, it's almost listening for what you can't hear.
Yeah, that's right. Like kind of the blank spaces, as it were.
Exactly. And then trying to work out who hasn't spoken, and have they not spoken because everything's been said and they don't feel they need to interject just to say they're there, or have they not spoken because they're not agreeing with something. And so what I tend to find I'm doing a lot more following up as soon as I can after those calls with one conversations with people, either just to say, yeah, that was great, thought you did a great presentation there, or noticed you were very quiet there, just want to check everything's okay. And both from a just to stand, are people, because everyone's dealing differently with lockdown and having to work from home, but trying to recreate those chats that you would have in a lunch break or as you're leaving the room, by really listening for what you can't hear. I think on those calls, that's been the big change for me, because you can't read body language, you can't see if someone's slumped in their chair, or shoulders hunched, or shaking their head vigorously because they disagree with something. So what I tend to do is, if I haven't heard somebody on a call and I think it's the sort of session they would normally have been involved in or interacting, get in touch with them straight away afterwards, not via an email, but via a phone call or via FaceTime or via something that you can then check everything's okay, check whether there was something they wanted to say that they didn't. And it's not perfect, but they're the sort of things that generally trip you up in these change programs, are the things that aren't said.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, because the reason why we're doing this series of interviews is about leaders, and obviously you're talking about the change side, but really that's management, isn't it? When you do management and do a sales kickoff, when you talk for a project, you're basically assessing what people's reaction is and have you got everyone on board, and it's difficult to do that if you can't, like you say, read the room.
Yes, absolutely. You have to. I find I'm just telling myself every time I go into one of those sort of meetings is you throw your assumptions out the window, unless you're pretty certain you can tell what someone's feeling, what their reaction is from that call. Assume you don't know, and therefore invest the time to try and find out.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It may be something nothing to do with the project, or it may be that they disagree with something, but it's because they're not in a room, because they can't see everyone, they feel a bit reticent to actually say in front of 20 people, well, I don't understand what that is, or I disagree with it. And so you've really got to work harder to try and get it out afterwards.
So what other advice would you give to business leaders like myself who are trying to drive change, like enforce change at this moment, that they could kind of listen to and follow through with, other than talking about reading the room, following up, that sort of thing?
I think the big thing for me is not to rely on the technology. That's the big one for me. Is the technology is great for facilitating the fact that we can still keep working, but even if it's not off the back of a sort of a virtual workshop or something like that, is spending the time to much more regularly than sort of a fortnightly or weekly one-to-one with people is just to be picking up the phone and calling people, dropping them a text, and checking how people are in general, because people and I don't want to stereotype the whole telecoms industry, but people, a lot of the people in telecoms, especially a lot of the people that work in the technology roles, are not necessarily good at sharing what they might be feeling, and we know ourselves that it affects us. So the lockdown, we discussed it on this on this call. So you can pretty much guarantee it's going to affect everyone, and it's going to affect them differently. And although it's an investment of time, taking the time just to ring someone up, even if you haven't got a particular question for them, it's just to see how they are, see if there's anything they want to get off their chest. Really investing that extra time in one-to-one conversations with people, trying to recreate those kind of water cooler or coffee machine moments from the office. I think it makes people know that they are they've got an outlet that they can speak if they want to, but secondly that they kind of haven't been forgotten because they're sitting at home in their office.
That's right.
And it's
listening to people on furlough and that sort of thing, even at this moment, who aren't actually working at the moment. You have to kind of keep them in mind as well, don't you?
Absolutely, because obviously what every business every business has had to make the difficult decision of putting people on furlough. What they're hoping is that those people can come back on furlough and come back into the business afterwards. And so almost sort of treating everyone in that same way, that says, well, what you want at the end of this, whatever that horrible phrase of the new normal, but however we end up at the end of this, what you want is to have employees and co-workers that are their mental well-being is absolutely paramount, and no matter what technology and what tools you've got, you can't do that you can't meet people. So the second best is to speak to people. You can't do it over email. You can't do it via any other tool than by speaking to people, in my opinion.
In driving this change, obviously you have to try that balance between, obviously I'm driving the change now, but I also have to think about what the business will be like in a year, 2 years time. So therefore, even the people on furlough, they need to buy into it, even though I can't actually bring them in all the meetings. It's that difficult balance, isn't it?
It is a difficult balance. I mean, I guess we're fortunate that we certainly in the people that I'm working with and the programs I'm working on, there's been nobody that's been put on furlough, so I don't have to that kind of particular that specific concern. But regardless of that, it is absolutely about as you say, whatever shape the business and the economy and the wider society looks like at the end of this, you need everyone to be kind of coming through that together. And you can only do that by speaking to people. And you can't assume that people will kind of ring you, email you, or speak up if they've got concerns, because that generally isn't the case in any of the change programs I've been involved. You have to go and seek out those issues and seek out those worries. And so even more important now to make sure you do that and kind of almost double up on it.
Yeah, because you haven't got that. And I mean, talking about the industry that you work in, and obviously you're at the kind of centre of a very progressive industry, what positives do you see kind of coming out of this current business landscape? I mean, what can you see the effect being kind of down the line, that 1, 2 year, 3 year period?
It's very difficult, isn't it? Because it almost feels at the moment like you can't really second guess a week or two ahead. So looking sort of several years ahead is, I mean, I guess the big thing for me is that, and this is very specific to telecoms, is that, I mentioned it before, it has brought home to people that really kind of maybe just took their internet service or their TV service for granted in the past, just how much they rely on internet, landline to some extent, but especially mobile and those entertainment services. So I think what it is going to lead to in the telecoms industry in general is some of the questions over things like 5G. I don't mean the daft questions about whether it causes coronavirus and this sort of thing, but I mean about whether we need that sort of capacity. Some of the questions about building out more broadband capacity. My personal view is I think it puts those questions to bed once and for all.
No, it's a key service, isn't it? It's an essential service that everyone needs it.
It is. So I think from that perspective, I think you're going to see a combination of stability followed by growth in the telecoms industry for that. I think that the thing that is likely to be quite different going forward is going to be how companies view some of their office estate and their office environment. Because certainly, as a business, we've still functioned with everyone being at home. We're still able to run projects. We're still able to serve customers. And I guess it's a sort of an opportunity and a concern for me with the type of work that I do is, I don't believe that the right answer is to say, well, actually everyone can work remotely now.
Yes, some companies get it, but like you said, how do you drive changes? How do you bring a new person to the business? How do you onboard someone? Exactly. That's what we're thinking about within our own company. If I've got a trainee that I want to hire, how do I train up a new hire if they're sat in the living room? That's very difficult, isn't it?
It is, and I think it requires companies to think differently about, for example, how they use their office spaces, because yes, having an office with 500 desks in it where people come and just sit at a desk and essentially replicate what they've been doing from home. Maybe those days are becoming more numbered, but actually the things that the office environment is really crucial for, like kicking off projects like inductions and recruiting people, but also things like just general collaboration and the mental health and well-being of people from that human to human interaction. I think there's an opportunity for businesses like telecoms, for example, to look at the environment in a different way.
Lots of new work for you there, Dave. So it's all good. New
Well,
change.
Yeah, I'm not saying that to try and drum up new projects.
Well, that is fine. You can do that. I mean, obviously, coming from a recruitment perspective, and we just talked about onboarding new hires, and that's how do you think this level of change will change the recruitment landscape going forward?
That's it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think there are some things that change the recruitment landscape that are sort of policy and political decisions, and so there'll be certain things, for example, like what does the government do with private sector IR35 going forward? Things like that can have significant change. I think there is certainly in the recruitment, a lot of the recruitment that we've done in that I see happening in Liberty Global is still done in sort of a relatively traditional way of the CVs come in and then people do the interviews. Actually, I think some of the remote working things like Zoom, like we're talking on now, some of those remote collaboration tools to actually help the recruitment process. It might be a different way of kind of staging the way that recruitment's done without people having to necessarily, first of all, travel into sort of 2 or 3 different
it's been a real godsend having this video education and our clients buying into how it might work. So.
Yeah, but equally, I don't think, certainly for me, I don't think we end up moving away from if you're recruiting somebody into a team, you can still have a CV that has everything ticked on a box, and then when you meet someone, when you talk to them, it's still that chance to sort of understand the fit, the culture, I don't think I don't see myself wanting to move to a place where you don't have that human to human interaction as part of the recruitment process.
I mean, it goes back to what you were saying, dealing with people, reading the room, understanding each person in the process, and maybe thinking differently about how your office estate and your kind of your workplace regime works, is really, really going to be kind of important kind of going forward. So I think there's a lot, there's more kind of questions coming out of this than answers about how we deal with this in the workplace. It's great to get your point of view on this, David. So Will, thank you very much. It's been great to kind of speak to you, and I look forward to seeing how that goes from your projects in the future. So thank you very much, David.
Well, thanks for inviting me, and it's been a really enjoyable chat. So thanks very much.